Chapter 10. Dust of Wrath. Renee thought that the morning fog seemed a little strange that Lord's Day. It hung heavily and more gray than usual. But fall changed everything. Albert fed Boucle some vegetables, and then both twins were ready for church. Several weeks had passed, and the month of October was upon them. The vineyard harvest was coming to an end. On this morning, when all were ready to leave for church, everyone climbed into the wagon for the trip. All the parents sat tightly together in the front seat, and all the children filled the back. They had to leave early as usual, since the horse and wagon couldn't race into town. On the way in, Albert quietly sang several psalms in her head, trying to guess which of them they might sing in worship that morning. Renee thought about the family worship the night before, when Father had taught them more about fearing and respecting God's name like Isaiah did. By the time their wagon reached the edge of the city, most of the fog had lifted, and from warming fireplaces a layer of smoke hung over the city. The sun shone weakly through some high clouds. In the normal quiet of a Lord's Day morning, the parents all noticed the sound of shouting voices carrying through the air from the town. Uncle Philippe pulled the reins and brought the horse to a stop. Renee and Albert stood up and listened, holding onto the back of the parents' seat. For a while, no one spoke. "It sounds like happy shouts," concluded Albert. And it did. Uncle Philippe started the horse moving again, and soon they were inside the city, moving slowly down side streets, still listening carefully. The cheering and the laughter became louder. Finally, they came around to the long street leading up to their church, and from a distance saw the back of the cheering crowd that surrounded their church house building. The wagon stopped cold, and the horse whinnied nervously. Father stood and leaned forward to get a better look. All the children were standing, mouths hanging open. At the far end of the street, their little modest building sat in pieces. The roof had been smashed and had fallen in. Wall planks slowly fell away as stones were pulled out. Inside, all the familiar benches, tables, and salters sat under broken wooden stones. The two families could see the destruction, but they heard no smashing, only cheers and laughter from the surrounding crowd. After a burst of dust, the whole front wall of the church teetered and then fell backward into a pile of rubble. The front of the crowd scattered for a moment and then let out another loud cheer. The dragoons who had started the demolition now started dispersing the crowd. Father was still standing, and just then a hand grabbed his leg and his body jumped. He instantly shook free and then realized that Elder Morin had touched him. Father jumped down from the wagon to speak with him. Hurriedly, Elder Morin explained, "We received notice this morning from Paris that the king has revoked the last of the laws protecting Reformed Christians. He says that since so many of the Reformed have converted back to the Roman Church, he no longer needs to extend the protection once given, and now says that he wants to remove all memory of our faith from his kingdom." Father sighed. "For years we knew this was coming. What else has the king decreed?" Elder Morin glanced at the rubble and the crowd and answered, "The king has banned all worship assemblies, preaching of God's word, and reformed schools. All pastors must convert to the Roman Church or leave within 15 days. All our children are from now on to be baptized and educated in the Roman Church on pain of penalty," Elder Morin said without wavering. "Ha!" scoffed Father with a confident grin. "The heirs of the covenant will not be forced into the idolatry of the Roman Church." Elder Morin more than agreed. "You must return home now," said Elder Morin. "After sundown we will meet for worship in the small forest clearing south of town, where we met in years past." "I remember," nodded Father. Elder Morin started to hurry off and then ran back to the wagon as it was moving off. He beckoned for Father to come to him so that he could whisper outside the hearing of the children. Father slid down again. "You should know, brother," said Elder Morin, "that last night the dragoons emptied your fabric shop and leveled your home. You cannot return." Father sighed and patted Elder Morin on the back, thanking him solemnly for the news. Soon the wagon was out of town, heading quickly back to the farm. Once back inside the farmhouse, Father and Uncle Philippe explained the king's wicked actions and calmed everyone down. From the front door, Abraham quietly watched the road for dragoons. After a long time of prayer, in which each child prayed, they remained indoors that afternoon. Albert and Renee were looking forward to holding church in the forest. They didn't know what to expect. The families ate the evening meal early that afternoon, since the October sun set earlier and earlier each night. Quickly, they cleaned the eating area and were soon back in the wagon, heading for the south side of town. The special forest clearing was closer to the farm than the town itself, so they didn't have to travel nearly as far. As they neared the clearing, Father and Uncle Philippe stared through the trees to try and find the exact place. There were so many trees, and it had been several years since they had been there. Mother saw it first and pointed. Uncle Philippe tied the horse and wagon off the road behind some bushy trees, and they all climbed out of the wagon. Father carried Guillaume and Phoebe through the trees, and Mother held the twins' hands. As they moved through the trees and brush, Mary's hair got tangled in a branch for a moment, and Albert tripped over a fallen branch, scraping her knee through her dress. The evening temperature was still pleasant, and soon they met up with other church families gathered in the forest clearing. Pastor de Laune and his wife Hannah greeted them, as did elders Morin and Pasquier. A few families were still to arrive, but in the end there was quite a big gathering. Only one family failed to show up. Soon, far away from the ears of the city, the Huguenots began to pray and sing. Mother's other sister, Aunt Annette, and her husband and family sat on fallen logs near her other sisters and their families. Abraham was old enough to remember when they had to meet out here before. It seemed to have lasted for months, and he wondered how this time would turn out. In between scripture readings, Renee gazed upward through the circle of towering trees and could see stars twinkling through some thin, high clouds. Those stars! She remembered what her father had told them. Someday they won't burn down our churches any more, she thought. Guillaume flicked a small bug off his robe and rocked gently back and forth on his log seat. At one point, Phoebe got fussy and started to cry, so Mother carried her behind the gathering, rocking her ever so gently on her shoulder. Pastor de Laune rose and began to deliver his sermon, opening with the latest news from La Rochelle. All the Reformed churches had been leveled to the ground. Several homes had been destroyed, and 3 families from other congregations had already packed and secretly moved away to Holland. One pastor had been imprisoned but was doing well, and one elder was missing. Pastor de Laune encouraged and exhorted his people by preaching from 1 Peter 1:6-8. Greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen you love. After only a short while into the sermon, a young man of the church came running into the gathering, breathing very hard. He was an elder's son who had been set by the road to listen for any trouble. Catching his breath, he whispered to the pastor, "Pastor de Laune, the dragons, 20 or so, are coming, this way. They are yet over the hill," he gasped. "Very well," stiffened the pastor. "Brothers and sisters, there is a time to stand and a time to hide. The dragoons are upon us. Hide in the forest to the west and the south. Return to your homes later or in the morning. God be with you." Without a word, fathers and older brothers picked up smaller children and set off into the forest. Father picked up the twins. Abraham grabbed Guillaume and Phoebe, and Mother and Mary ran holding hands. Uncle Philippe picked up Martha, and Sarah and Aunt Catherine lifted Jeanette and held Elizabeth's hand alongside her. They all could hear the horses and clinking of the soldiers, but Pastor de Laune and his wife and 2 children stood firm. Father and Uncle Philippe paused to listen and offer help, and the 2 elders spoke hurriedly to the pastor. "But you must go. You will be imprisoned if you stay," stressed Elder Pasquier. With a quick, authoritative whisper, Pastor de Laune declared to both elders, "But a hireling who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and flees, and the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. I am not a hireling. Please, brethren, take my wife and children and go now." Elder Pasquier, in exasperation, turned to the pastor's wife. "Dear Hannah, please plead for your husband's life. Persuade him to leave. He may be separated from you and your children forever." Hannah gently touched the elder's cheek and smiled. "He is a faithful watchman, called and under duty to Christ to protect these sheep. I would expect nothing less from him. You see," added the pastor, "I may fail like Adam, but my wife is no Eve. Go now. I will keep the dragoons' attention here. Care for my wife and children if need be." After a quick embrace of her husband, Hannah and all the others ran into the forest. No one looked back at the pastor, but if they had, they would have seen him calling the dragoons over to himself. "Over here! Over here! I am the one you want!" he called out. When they finally heard him, all the dragoons stopped looking elsewhere and surrounded Pastor de Laune. They stared down at him from their tall horses. He started asking the dragoons questions about their authority and the king's recent changes, all to give his people more time to flee. Finally, the captain angrily stopped answering questions. "Will you deny that you assembled your people here for religious exercises of the pretended reform religion, though you know that the king has forbidden all such assemblies?" asked the dragoon captain. Looking the captain straight in the eye, Pastor de Leon spoke slowly and calmly, still delaying as much as possible. "I will most forthrightly confess that I called such an assembly, and that in these circumstances I am bound, as were the holy apostles, to obey God rather than man, and that—" The dragoon kicked him in the chest, knocking him to the ground. "Tie him to my horse. I will drag him to jail," he ordered one dragoon. He ordered the others to pursue any people fleeing through the forests. The soldiers rode off, though because of the thickness of the trees, their horses couldn't get very far, as the elders knew. So the dragoons dismounted and started running through the forest on foot. The remaining soldier bound Pastor de Leon's legs together and then ran a rope from them to the captain's saddle. The captain rode off, dragging the praying pastor behind him. The captain was pleased that he had captured another pastor. He would be rewarded for this. No one ever saw Pastor de Leon again. Father, Uncle Philippe, and Abraham grew more tired as they ran, carrying the children. Abraham kept looking back, and Phoebe cried loudly. Father held the twins firmly against his chest. They buried their faces in his shirt, since so many branches kept scratching them. Once, Father tripped, and all three of them fell into some thorny bushes. Though the believers kept running and hiding, the dragoons had long given up searching. Pastor de Leon had delayed the soldiers so long that not one dragoon came even close to any of the families. Finally, all the wives and children gathered around the fathers, and though a few people had small cuts, scratches, and bruises, no one was seriously hurt. Uncle Philippe's family met up with the Martineaus, and they decided to spend the night in the forest, since they were far from the wagon and the farm. Father and Abraham cleared away some underbrush, and Uncle Philippe, Elizabeth, and Mary gathered piles of soft leaves to sleep on. Though the temperature was still pleasant, all the children snuggled closely to their parents. Father asked Mother to pray, thanking the Lord for protecting them, hoping that he would protect Pastor de Leon. Mother and Aunt Catherine planned to visit the pastor the next day in jail, but he wouldn't be there. Renee and Albert asked their parents to sing them to sleep with a psalm. With all the children huddled together, Father and Mother quietly sang until all the tired little eyes had closed. Secured by thine unfailing grace, in thee they find a hiding place. When foes their plots devise, a sure retreat thou wilt prepare, and keep them safely sheltered there.